It was a tacit warning that her position was no longer inviolable. In the midnight shadows of the palace, Camilla sat curled up in a large armchair, her vacant gaze fixed on the deserted courtyard through a misty window pane. Partner, the man she believed would always shield her from any storm, had chosen the supreme interest of the crown over personal affection. The king's decisive action was not merely a measure to appease public outrage the day she first entered the family. One more misstep could cost her everything. Amid her absolute dread, she understood that this audit would do more than just expose hidden bank accounts. It was the lever slowly prying her away from the epicenter of the realm, yielding the spotlight. An unprecedented loneliness enveloped the powerful woman, as even her most loyal courtiers began distancing themselves for self-preservation. Camilla bitterly recognized that her standing was facing its greatest peril since an internal audit into all allegations leveled against Camilla. Upon receiving the news, Camilla felt a chilling shiver run down her spine. She realized that her lifelong understood she had no choice but to accept a bitter reality. The prideful strides of the past were replaced by a quiet retreat into the background. Her public calendar was slashed to the absolute minimum, and the charitable portfolios that once sat within her domain were systematically transferred to other offices, a profound sense of resentment and futility washing over her as she witnessed her influence evaporate day by day. Royal observers, wherever she set foot, crowds gathered with unfeigned reverence, their admiring eyes fixed upon the princess, who now bore the prestige of the Order of the Thistle. Her presence was no longer merely the execution of a duty. It had transformed into her press offices fell into a state of total silence to avoid provoking further public outrage. Sitting isolated in her darkened quarters, Camilla could only watch as a symbol of legitimacy, an impenetrable shield, protecting the monarchy's reputation from skepticism. Anne's powerful, steadfast assent stood in sharp, inverse proportion to the fading relevance of the Queen's court. Faced with the irreversible pressure of the financial audit results and the icy detachment of public opinion, Queen Camilla incredibly unfavorable light, the king endured agonizing hours of internal conflict. He paced by the window overlooking the desolate courtyard, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his face other. Charles III understood that indulgence at this hour would mean the self-destruction of the throne. His gaze locked onto the decree, elevating his sister, which lay open on the desk like the sole remaining life raft for the monarchy's reputation. As the night grew old, light of transparency and discipline, tacitly casting aside the scandalous liabilities brought by Camilla. This blow from the future king pushed King Charles III into an irreversible corner. Standing before a desk piled high with damning financial audits and artifact inventories that cast his wife in an incredible tribute. It was a masterfully calculated political maneuver. By openly endorsing the elevation of Anne's stature within the future royal architecture, William delivered a resounding signal from the direct line of succession. The next generation of the monarchy stood entirely on the side, deeply lined with exhaustion and profound disappointment. Torn between decades of personal affection on one side and the very survival and honor of the crown on the other, silences hanging over family dinners all heralded a gathering storm. What Camilla did not yet realize was that the king's decision to honor Anne was no random act of sibling affection. It was the opening move in a grand strategy to purge and protect the throne, executed just as the dark corners of her own greed and abuse of power were beginning to come to light. The media storm did not breach Buckingham's schedule of service, as though the swirling controversy outside did not exist. Whispers of a silent but fierce struggle for power began to ripple through the palace galleries and the major newsrooms of London. The guarded glances exchanged between ladies-in-waiting, the hurried paces of royal courtiers, and the heavy Palace with a single resounding clap of thunder, but rather through a relentless influx of confidential dossiers onto the king's desk and the blazing red headlines dominating the front pages of London's major broadsheets. A barrage of severe allegations backed by intricate transaction data and precise timelines converged directly upon Queen Camilla. At the heart of the scandal was the revelation by the public as the symbol of a new royal era, transparent, disciplined, and devoted. The absolute consensus and support from public opinion wrapped around the princess like a brilliant aura, officially elevating her influence to its zenith. As the ceremonial honor upon Anne at such a sensitive juncture was far more than a ceremonial reward. It was an explicit signal preparing the monarchy for its future. The palace was tacitly sending a message that media converged upon Anne so intensely that it transformed her into the sole epicenter of the event, completely eclipsing the presence of anyone else. Close-up shots of her resolute face beneath the black velvet chaperone, adorned with plumes, and the Thistle star insignia glittering on her breast, played on a loop across international television networks. Every gesture, from the way she accepted congratulations from the Scottish nobility to her upright posture before the cathedral altar, was praised. During the volatile generational transition ahead, Anne would serve as the ultimate anchor, the individual who would guide and protect Prince William's direct line of succession from internal fractures. The gaze of the global center served as the flawless generational bridge, safeguarding the foundations of the throne to prepare for the day Prince William and Catherine would officially inherit the sovereign power. As the blinding media flashbulbs finally dimmed, returning quiet to the long galleries of the palace, the new order stood firmly cemented. Standing by the grand window of her office, Princess Anne looked out at the vast courtyard, where the guards executed the changing of the guard with a profound and comprehensive shift of influence deep within the House of Windsor. King Charles III's decisive action, paired with Prince William's ironclad support, had mapped out a clear trajectory for the future, a realm governed by transparency, discipline, and unconditional devotion. Within this blueprint, Anne's presence at the epicenter work precision. Her hands lightly smoothed the crease of her blazer, her expression entirely unmoved by the glory she had just achieved. For her and sharp political analysts delivered a unanimous verdict: the role reversal between these two powerful women was no mere temporary damage control measure. They argued that this was merely the beginning. The opening chapters of power had never been. The objective duty was absolute. She turned back to her desk and resumed flipping through long-term service schedules for the years ahead, fully prepared to remain the steadfast anchor for the next chapter of her family. The foundational core values of loyalty and integrity would always be the only things to endure and guide the future. The bloodless war for the realm had concluded with an absolute victory for the one who earned it, ushering in an era of stability and renewed hope for the entire monarchy. After reading the story, do you believe King Charles III's decision to bestow this noble honor upon Princess Anne was purely a reward for her loyalty, or was it in fact a cold political maneuver to sideline Queen Camilla and protect the future of the monarchy? Share your thoughts with us in the family's history. The image of Princess Anne in the iconic deep green velvet mantle of the Order of the Thistle, standing erect and majestic in the Scottish twilight, was permanently etched into the public consciousness, becoming the immutable symbol of a new era for the British monarchy. It stood as a resounding declaration that no matter what storms the crown endured, or what fractures human greed might cause, Charles III affixed his signature to the final decision, officially approving the appointment of Princess Anne as an extra lady of the Order of the Thistle, while simultaneously rejecting every delaying tactic attempted by Camilla's office. The heavy thud of the royal wax seal, stamping down in deep crimson, marked the end of the Queen's exclusive privileges. The decree was issued with the cold rationale of a reigning monarch formally establishing a new order, where Anne's devotion was exalted to the highest tier, leaving Camilla behind. The space within the king's study fell into absolute silence, broken only by the sharp, clean scratch of a fountain pen gliding across the heavy parchment. King Hind to face the bitter sting of a woman disenfranchised within her own home. News of the official scheduling of Princess Anne's investiture ceremony was swiftly broadcast by leading media outlets, igniting a fervent wave of discussion across waves through the royal corridors. Isn't the title itself, but the timing. Until now, Queen Camilla stood almost entirely alone as the prominent female royal, holding this.
If you look at the coronation footage, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the king, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes. And that was because they were angry with Camilla.
Of the misconduct. Then, in a twist that left the palace stunned instead of shielding his wife, as many anticipated, King Charles took a decisive turn, elevating. A bombshell decision has just emerged from Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne has officially been appointed an Extra Lady of the Order of the Thistle, Scotland's highest chivalric honor. Yet what is sending shock? Highly symbolic privilege. The catalyst for this sudden shift stems from a brewing scandal. As allegations of embezzlement from royal charities began to surface, the king was reportedly left furious upon discovering the true scale to those far more worthy. While the internal audits began to weave their way into every hidden corner of the royal financial administration, the atmosphere within the palace fractured. As for Anne, organically transformed into a natural vote of confidence. Throughout the corridors of power, the monarchy's senior advisors began to shift their stance. They viewed her not merely as an industrious royal, but as the ultimate face of stability and the firm, empathetic handshakes with the public. To her stern, focused demeanor while receiving briefings was captured by media lenses as definitive proof of an unshakable symbol of devotion. The public's warm reception and resounding applause to two distinct extremes. In the very eye of the storm, Princess Anne maintained an astonishing work ethic, appearing in continuous succession at public engagements spanning from London to the remotest rural shires. Every step she took from her future of the House of Windsor during this crisis of public trust. Anne's soaring prestige immediately ignited intense, hushed discussions behind the heavy closed oak doors of the palace conference rooms. Meetings between the king, his private secretaries, and representatives of the home. King Charles III had always been forged in an absolute reverence for duty, even if they rarely saw eye to eye on the finer mechanics of ruling the realm. Receiving this glorious symbol of Scottish heritage did nothing to alter the disciplined rhythm of her daily life, yet declaration of power. The announcement instantly captivated both the media and the public, for everyone understood that elevating Anne's stature at this precise moment was a calculated strategic gambit designed to unwittingly thrust her into the epicenter of a bloodless coup. Conversely, on the opposing side of the corridors of power, Queen Camilla received the news with a poorly concealed sense of dread. Prior to this sudden turning point, Camilla had reigned as the sole contemporary female royal to hold this prestigious Scottish distinction, a privilege shaped the balance of influence within the palace. For Princess Anne, who had spent over half a century quietly executing thousands of royal engagements without a single word of complaint, the honor was a long overdue recompense. She stood as a beacon of stability, a steadfast pillar for the throne throughout its many turbulent eras. The bond between her and her brother, authoritative nod toward the crowd. Meanwhile, in distant London, these radiant images played out across a television screen in a silent room of the palace where another woman was forced to witness her rival's glorious chapter with utter helplessness. The historic investiture was not merely a moment of personal triumph, concluded amidst the echoing toll of church bells reverberating through the historic streets of Edinburgh. Princess Anne stepped through the main doors to face thousands of citizens cheering and waving flags. She offered a faint smile, a gentle yet authoritative. Princess Anne was universally recognized by both the public and the political establishment as the most prominent and trustworthy face of the contemporary monarchy. Her official engagements, ranging from high-level diplomatic audiences to grassroots community inspections, commanded intense fascination and fierce media coverage, did not fade. Instead, they continued to reverberate, forging an entirely new landscape within the power structure of Buckingham Palace. Following that fateful day for Anne, it had permanently carved a truth into the heart of the monarchy. The era of Camilla's monopoly on influence had come to an absolute end, yielding to the ascension of a true icon. The echoes of the historic investiture in Scotland, characteristically brisk and resolute stride. As King Charles III placed the insignia upon his sister's shoulder, their eyes met, carrying a deep understanding that transcended mere sibling affection. Clasped lightly in front of her, devoid of any arrogant display, showing only a calm, stern dignity that served as a public affirmation of her new standing. A position built upon unyielding loyalty rather than calculated ambitions. The event was viewed by observers and the public alike as a It was the shared gaze of two individuals bearing the destiny of a sovereign institution. Anne offered a slight inclination of her head to accept the honor, her hands resounding declaration, a milestone confirming the reordering of the hierarchy within the royal household. Across major broadsheets and live commentary segments, analysts continuously parsed the deeper significance behind the solemn rituals in Scotland. Many sharp commentators remarked that bestowing this noble exuded absolute confidence and poise, the culmination of over half a century of tireless service. The heavy mantle of dark green velvet, exquisitely embroidered with Scotland's thistle motifs, swept across the ancient stone floor without hindering her carrying Anne's stature to unprecedented heights. Sources reveal that Camilla was utterly outraged by the news, compounding the tension, the hidden hands of Prince William in critical hour. Within the ancient fortified stone walls of Buckingham Palace, a newly released communique instantly sent a subterranean shockwave through the royal corridors, unsettling the long-established order of the monarchy. The official decree handed down by King Charles III was absolute. Prince Catherine are said to be behind the move, having repeatedly pushed to grant Anne more power and influence to salvage the monarchy's tarnished image. Is Anne's new honor merely a reward for her lifelong service, or is it a Princess Anne, his devoted younger sister, long hailed as the living embodiment of royal loyalty, was officially appointed an Extra Lady of the Order of the Thistle. As Scotland's highest chivalric honor, it was a privilege that transcended mere ceremonial vanity. It was a resounding, calculated counteroffensive designed to isolate Camilla from the epicenter of power. And what secrets does Camilla hold that forced even King Charles III to turn his back on her? At this home office grew increasingly frequent, a venue where the balance of roles between the Queen and the Princess Royal was coldly weighed. Camilla, though restricted from public duties, pending the political deadlock, another major upheaval emerged from Kensington Palace, causing the situation to spiral completely out of Camilla's control. Prince William, during the investigation's outcome, desperately clawed for information through her few remaining loyalists. The Queen's anxiety was etched clearly across her face, her brow furrowing sharply at every sound of hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway. She knew her position was being eroded by her husband's terrifying silence, and that those closed-door deliberations were in truth the systematic stripping of the symbolic privileges she once held, all to be transferred into the hands of another. Amidst this pulling an official engagement for his core strategic charity, took the initiative to offer exceptional praise and publicly express his deep reverence for the lifelong contributions of his aunt, Princess Anne. This gesture was far more than a simple of greed and abuse of power. Her sister-in-law shone as a beacon of devotion and unblemished integrity. This implicit comparison by the public acted like invisible blades, cutting deep into the agonizing envy smoldering inside her scheduled patronages. Dressed simply yet impeccably, accepting warm handshakes from the public became a soothing balm for the monarchy's battered image. This juxtaposition played out across all media outlets as a bitter irony for Camilla. While the Queen was besieged by accusations inside Camilla's heart. The crisis reached its zenith when King Charles III, under heavy pressure from his senior advisors and the Privy Council, made a cold but necessary calculation. Rather than attempting a cover-up in line with past precedents, the king officially signed a decree ordering a comprehensive independent. She bolted upright and began pacing anxiously along the hand-woven wool carpet, desperately searching her mind for an escape route, only to find herself bricked in by dead ends. In stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere engulfing the Queen's apartments, Princess Anne's life and work proceeded with absolute stability, like a solid ridge of rock amidst a raging torrent. In the very eye of the media hurricane, images of the Princess Royal quietly appearing at her secretary had just placed on the desk with a tentative, hesitant air. Her greatest fear, the fear of being replaced, of being marginalized from the symbolic rituals she had once used to assert her sovereign status as queen, was now solidifying into a tangible reality, cementing her status as the symbol of pure, unblemished royal values. The media magnet surrounding the Princess Royal grew so powerful that even her smallest actions were analyzed through a lens. Sitting concealed behind thick silk drapes that barred the sunlight from entering the room, Camilla felt a deep, relentless dread gnawing at her soul by the minute. She flipped through the newspapers, staring at the headlines extolling Anne, before glancing at the report on her own negative public approval ratings, which her seconds of profound respect, organically elevating her prestige to an unprecedented peak. That media explosion dealt a continuous succession of psychological blows straight to Queen Camilla's private quarters. Social platforms and front pages alike, everywhere, people offered endless praise for what was deemed the monarchy's wisest and most popular decision in years. The public embraced the event with immense jubilation. Photographs capturing Anne's decades of quiet service were widely shared, so elevating Anne's stature was not merely a reward for the past, but a strategic blueprint for the future. Numerous analyses pointed out that Anne was becoming the most anticipated figure for the next her presence within the royal household. The fracture in Camilla's standing became even more glaring as royal experts and political commentators began delivering sharp assessments on live television. They no longer hesitated to analyze that to an outsider, a relic of a turbulent era that the palace was desperate to close as it looked toward a cleaner, legitimate transfer of power. This symbolic next generation, a steadfast pillar to anchor the future reign of her nephew, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. This tacit generational alliance unwittingly transformed Camilla into. Every word of praise directed at Anne served as a bitter reminder that her own influence was decaying and that her sister-in-law's shadow was stretching out, completely eclipsed over the rows of dignitaries and royal family members, all waiting in hushed anticipation for the monumental moment. As the traditional fanfare of pipes and drums resonated through the air, Princess Anne officially entered the cathedral to receive the title of Extra Lady of the Order. Grasp. Camilla understood that when tomorrow's dawn broke, the world outside would speak only of Anne, while she would remain a somber chapter receding slowly into the shadows of royal history. St. Giles to a new historical milestone for the monarchy.